Hello, and welcome to our channel, Stories with Silas. We hope you enjoy watching.
Layla watched the billionaire's hands shake as he stared at the dying $100,000 anniversary flowers that held his wife's last connection to her dead grandmother. In 90 minutes, the celebration would begin, and only a forbidden desert technique Layla had sworn never to reveal could save what his fortune couldn't replace. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go! The silence that descended upon the Burj Astrea's grand lobby was suffocating. Staff members froze mid-step, guests paused their conversations, and even the ornate fountain seemed to quiet its gentle cascade. All eyes turned toward the marble reception desk, where an impeccably dressed man stood rigid, his face drained of color as he stared at a massive floral arrangement that had, just hours ago, been a breathtaking masterpiece of botanical perfection. Now, the rare orchids drooped like broken promises, and the heritage roses hung their heads in silent defeat. The man's voice, though controlled, carried the weight of devastation across the opulent space. No one dared breathe until a young waitress, her hands trembling slightly, took a hesitant step forward. What she was about to do would change everything. Layla Hassan had never imagined herself working in Dubai's most exclusive hotel. At 28, she was supposed to be finishing her hospitality management degree, not serving champagne and canapes to guests who spent more on a single night's stay than her family earned in a year. Yet here she was, balancing dual jobs as a hospitality student and waitress at the Burj Astrea, a gleaming tower of glass and gold that rose from the desert like a modern-day palace from the Arabian Nights. The hotel was legendary, perched on the edge of the Persian Gulf, with views that stretched endlessly across turquoise waters. Its interior was a symphony of white marble, crystal chandeliers, and gold leaf accents that caught the light in 1,000 different ways. The lobby alone could accommodate a small village, with its soaring ceilings, pristine columns, and carefully curated art pieces that cost more than most people's homes. It catered to royalty, tech moguls, international celebrities, and billionaires who valued discretion above all else. Layla's path to the Burj Astrea had been anything but straightforward. She was born in a small Bedouin village on the outskirts of the empty quarter, where her grandmother, Amina, had raised her after her parents died in a car accident when she was just 6 years old. Life in the desert had been simple but profound. No running water, no electricity, just the vast expanse of sand, the relentless sun, and the ancient wisdom passed down through generations. Her grandmother had been a keeper of traditional knowledge, teaching Layla everything, from how to navigate by the stars to how to preserve precious water and coax life from the harshest environments. Amina had a particular gift with plants, knowing instinctively how to heal them, how to make them thrive even in impossible conditions. She would collect desert herbs, cultivate small gardens using techniques that dated back centuries, and create remedies that locals swore by. When Layla was 18, her grandmother had encouraged her to pursue education in the city. "The old ways are precious, Habibti," Amina had told her, pressing a small leather pouch of dried desert herbs into her hands. "But you must build bridges between the past and the future, learn their ways, but never forget ours." Dubai had been overwhelming at first. The noise, the crowds, the towering buildings that seemed to scrape the sky itself. Layla had enrolled in a hospitality program at one of the city's universities, taking out loans and working multiple jobs to support herself while sending money back to her grandmother. The contrast between her desert upbringing and the glittering metropolis couldn't have been more stark. Her tiny apartment in the older part of the city was a modest studio on the 5th floor of a building with unreliable air conditioning. She shared the floor with other service workers, all of them chasing dreams that seemed perpetually just out of reach. Her room was simple: a narrow bed, a small desk where she studied late into the night, and a windowsill where she kept a collection of small potted plants. Descendants of cuttings her grandmother had given her, she tended them with the same care Amina had taught her, speaking to them softly in the dialect of their village, using the old techniques that seemed almost like prayer. The job at the Burj Astria had been a miracle. When Layla applied, she hadn't expected to hear back. The hotel was known for its impossibly high standards and preference for staff with years of luxury service experience. But during her interview, when asked what made her qualified, she had spoken honestly about her grandmother's teachings on hospitality, that true service came from the heart, that guests should be treated as honored visitors to your home, and that attention to the smallest details could transform an ordinary experience into something memorable. Something in her words had resonated with Mrs. Samira Al-Mazroui, the hotel's stern but fair operations manager. Perhaps it was Layla's genuine warmth, or maybe the fact that she understood the cultural nuances of Arab hospitality in a way that many Western-trained staff didn't. Whatever the reason, Layla had been offered a position as a junior waitress, working primarily in the hotel's exclusive Sky Lounge and handling special events. The morning had started like any other at the Burj Astria. Layla arrived 2 hours before her shift, as she always did, to help the housekeeping staff prepare the Sky Lounge for the day's service. She meticulously arranged crystal glasses until they caught the morning light just so, polished silverware until it gleamed like liquid mercury, and memorized the day's menu with the same dedication she applied to her university studies. Every detail mattered: the precise angle of a napkin fold, the temperature of the water in the finger bowls, the way a plate was presented to emphasize the chef's artistry. She had learned quickly that working at the Burj Astria required a specific kind of excellence. The hotel's clientele expected perfection as their baseline, and anything less than flawless service was simply unacceptable. The head chef, Pierre Rousseau, was a temperamental Frenchman who had earned 3 Michelin stars before accepting the hotel's astronomical salary. The general manager, Mr. Hassan Al-Fahim, ran the property with military precision, his keen eye missing nothing. And Mrs. Al-Mazroui, who had hired Layla, maintained standards so exacting that staff members had been dismissed for infractions as minor as a wrinkled collar or a forgotten smile. Yet Layla had found her rhythm. She moved through the dining room with quiet grace, anticipating needs before guests articulated them, offering service that felt personal rather than transactional. Her warmth was genuine, a reflection of her grandmother's teaching that every person deserved dignity and kindness, regardless of their wealth or status. Within weeks, she had earned the trust of the regular guests, many of whom requested her specifically when making reservations. That particular Saturday in late October, the entire staff had been on high alert since dawn. Word had spread through the back corridors that Sheikh Rashid Al Nahyan, one of Dubai's most prominent businessmen and philanthropists, had booked the hotel's most exclusive private dining room for a very special occasion: his 20th wedding anniversary celebration with his wife, Sheikha Mariam. Sheikh Rashid was a man of legendary status in the Emirates. He had built his fortune in sustainable technology and green energy, holding patents on solar innovations that were revolutionizing desert construction. Beyond his business acumen, he was known for his generosity. His charitable foundation funded hospitals, schools, and cultural preservation projects throughout the Arab world. He was also famously devoted to his wife, a relationship that had begun when they were both university students in London, long before his billions materialized. The anniversary celebration was to be intimate, just the two of them, but Sheikh Rashid had spared no expense. He had commissioned the hotel's executive chef to create a 7-course menu featuring Sheikha Mariam's favorite dishes from their travels together: saffron-infused risotto from their honeymoon in Italy, perfectly grilled lamb from their trip to Morocco, delicate pastries from a small patisserie in Paris they'd discovered as newlyweds. But the centerpiece of the evening, the element Sheikh Rashid had obsessed over for months, was the floral arrangement. It wasn't just any arrangement, it was a masterpiece that had required coordination across 3 continents. The Sheikh had hired the world's most renowned floral designer, a reclusive artist named Alessandro Benedetti, who accepted only a handful of commissions each year. Alessandro had sourced impossibly rare specimens, ghost orchids from the Florida Everglades, cultivated at tremendous expense and difficulty. Juliet roses, the legendary English roses that had taken 15 years to develop. Quadruple flowers from Sri Lanka, said to bloom only once a year at midnight. And Shenzhen Nongke orchids, genetically modified specimens that cost thousands of dollars per stem. The arrangement also incorporated heritage roses from Sheikha Mariam's family garden in Lebanon, carefully preserved and transported. The floral arrangement had arrived at the hotel at precisely 6 a.m., accompanied by Alessandro himself and 2 assistants who treated the creation with the reverence usually reserved for priceless artifacts. Layla had been finishing her preparation of the private dining room when the procession entered, and she had stepped back in genuine awe. The arrangement stood nearly 4 feet tall, a cascading symphony of color and texture that seemed to defy the laws of nature. The ghost orchids floated like ethereal spirits among deep crimson Juliet roses, while the quadruple flowers added an almost luminescent quality to the composition. The Shenzhen Nongke orchids provided structural elegance, their modified petals catching light in ways that natural flowers simply couldn't. And woven throughout were the heritage roses from Sheikha Mariam's childhood home, their soft pink petals carrying the weight of memory and meaning. Alessandro had supervised the placement himself, adjusting the arrangement by millimeters until he was satisfied with how the morning light fell across the blooms. He spent 20 minutes instructing the hotel staff on the precise care requirements. The arrangement needed to be kept at exactly 68 degrees Fahrenheit, with 60% humidity, away from direct sunlight but not in darkness, and absolutely no artificial air currents from air conditioning vents. "These flowers," Alessandro had said in his thick Italian accent, his hands moving expressively, "they are not just decoration. They are living art, each bloom chosen for its meaning, its rarity, its connection to the sheikh and his wife's journey together. The ghost orchids represent the ethereal quality of true love, rare, difficult to sustain, but breathtaking when it flourishes. The Juliet roses took 15 years to perfect, just as a marriage requires patience and dedication. The quadruple blooms for one night only, reminding us that each moment together is precious and fleeting." Layla had listened intently, moved by the poetry of it all. She understood, perhaps better than the other staff members, the significance of such careful attention to detail. Her grandmother had taught her that flowers were messengers, that their care and presentation spoke volumes about the giver's heart. This arrangement was Sheikh Rashid's love letter in botanical form, a testament to 2 decades of partnership. After Alessandro departed, leaving detailed care instructions with the hotel's head of events, Layla had been assigned to the private dining room service. It was an honor. Only the most trusted staff members were permitted to serve the hotel's VIP guests in such intimate settings. She would be working alongside Omar, a senior waiter with 15 years of experience and directly supervised by Mrs. Al-Mazrui herself. The day passed in a blur of preparation. The dining room, located on the hotel's 45th floor with panoramic views of the Gulf, was transformed into a romantic sanctuary. Soft golden lighting replaced the usual bright illumination. Candles in crystal holders were placed strategically around the room. The table was set with the hotel's finest china, each piece hand-painted with delicate gold leaf. The silverware was Georgian sterling, polished until it looked like liquid metal, Layla checked and rechecked every detail, the precise placement of each fork, the angle of the wine glasses, the temperature of the butter pats. She had been entrusted with preparing the small touches that would personalize the experience, a playlist of songs that held meaning for the couple, curated from a list Sheikh Rashid had provided, handwritten place cards in Arabic calligraphy, and small gift boxes at each setting containing custom-made jewelry that the Sheikh had commissioned. By 3 p.m., everything was perfect. The kitchen staff had begun their preparations, working under Chef Rousseau's exacting standards. The sommelier had decanted the wines, allowing them to breathe at precisely the right temperature. The table gleamed, the candles stood ready to be lit, and the arrangement, that magnificent, costly arrangement, commanded the room's attention like a queen holding court. Sheikh Rashid was scheduled to arrive at 6:30 p.m. with Sheikha Mariam, which meant the staff had 3.5 hours to ensure every element remained flawless. Layla took a moment to step back and admire the room. It looked like something from a fairy tale, a setting worthy of celebrating 2 decades of love and partnership. She had no idea that within hours, everything would unravel. At 4:45 p.m., Layla noticed something wrong. She had entered the private dining room to light the candles and perform a final inspection when her eyes fell upon the floral arrangement. Her heart stopped. Several of the ghost orchids had begun to droop, their delicate white petals curling inward as though trying to protect themselves from some invisible threat. The Juliet roses, which had stood proud and vibrant just an hour earlier, now hung their heads at unnatural angles. Even the hardy Shenzhen Nongke orchids showed signs of distress, their modified petals losing their lustrous sheen. Layla's mind raced. She had grown up watching her grandmother nurse dying plants back to health, and she recognized the signs immediately. These flowers were in shock, stressed by environmental conditions that were pushing them past their tolerance limits. But how? Alessandro had been so specific with his instructions, and the hotel staff had followed them meticulously. She quickly checked the thermostat, 68 degrees, exactly as specified. She glanced at the humidity gauge, 62%, slightly higher than recommended, but not drastically so. Then she looked up and felt her stomach drop. The air conditioning vent, which had been closed during Alessandro's morning visit, was now fully open, blasting cold, dry air directly onto the arrangement. Someone must have adjusted it during the afternoon preparations, probably assuming the room would need extra cooling before the guests arrived. It was an innocent mistake, the kind of well-intentioned error that happened in busy hotels every day. But this mistake was catastrophic. The flowers had been exposed to harsh, drying air currents for at least an hour, maybe longer. Layla immediately closed the vent and rushed to find Mrs. Al-Mazroui, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She found the operations manager in the executive office, reviewing final details with Mr. Al-Fahim. "Mrs. Al-Mazroui," Layla said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the panic clawing at her chest, "there's a problem with the flowers." The color drained from Mrs. Al-Mazroui's face. Both she and Mr. Al-Fahim followed Layla to the dining room, their footsteps quick and purposeful. When they saw the arrangement, Mrs. Al-Mazroui let out a small gasp, and Mr. Al-Fahim's jaw tightened visibly. "What happened?" he asked sharply. Layla explained about the air conditioning vent. Mrs. Al-Mazroui immediately began making phone calls, first to Alessandro's assistant, then to several local florists, her voice growing increasingly desperate with each conversation. The news was uniformly bad. Alessandro had already departed for the airport, flying to his next commission in Singapore. No local florist had anything remotely comparable to these rare specimens. And even if they could source substitutes, there simply wasn't enough time. Within minutes, the head of housekeeping arrived, followed by Chef Rousseau and Omar. A small crisis team formed in the dining room, everyone staring at the wilting arrangement as though collective willpower might revive it. Someone suggested misting the flowers with water. Another recommended moving them to a cooler location. Mrs. Al-Mazrui vetoed both ideas, terrified that any intervention without expert guidance might make things worse. "We need to call Sheikh Rashid," Mr. Al-Fahim said finally, his voice heavy with resignation. "We cannot let him walk into this room and discover it himself. We must tell him what has happened and offer our sincerest apologies." Mrs. Al-Mazrui nodded slowly, pulling out her phone. Her hand trembled slightly as she dialed. Layla watched, feeling helpless and heartbroken. She thought about Sheikh Rashid's careful planning, the months of coordination, the symbolic meaning Alessandro had described. This wasn't just about expensive flowers. It was about a man's tribute to the woman he loved, a carefully crafted expression of 2 decades together. The phone call was brief and painful. When Mrs. Al-Mazrui hung up, her face was ashen. "He's coming immediately," she said quietly. "He wants to see for himself." The staff stood in tense silence, the weight of their failure hanging heavy in the air. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Layla could see the sun beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. In less than 2 hours, this room should have been filled with candlelight, music, and the quiet joy of 2 people celebrating their journey together. Instead, it would be the scene of crushing disappointment. 20 minutes later, Sheikh Rashid Al Nahyan strode through the hotel's private entrance, flanked by 2 security personnel who maintained a respectful distance. He was younger than Layla had expected, perhaps in his mid-40s, with distinguished silver threading through his dark hair and an air of quiet authority that needed no announcement. He wore a traditional white dishdasha and black bisht, the formal cloak moving with elegant precision as he walked. His face was composed, but Layla could see the tension in his jaw, the worry lines creasing his forehead. Mr. Al-Fahim and Mrs. Al-Mazrui met him in the lobby, their apologies already spilling forth, but Sheikh Rashid raised a hand, silencing them with a gesture that was firm, but not unkind. "Show me," was all he said. The small procession moved toward the private elevator. Sheikh Rashid, the 2 managers, his security team, and the crisis response staff, including Layla. The elevator ride to the 45th floor felt interminable, the silence broken only by the soft whir of the machinery. Layla found herself studying the Sheikh's reflection in the polished elevator doors. His eyes were fixed straight ahead, but she could see the emotions swimming beneath his controlled exterior. Disappointment, frustration, and something deeper that looked like genuine sadness. When the elevator doors opened and they entered the dining room, Sheikh Rashid stopped in his tracks. For a long moment, he simply stood there, staring at the arrangement that had cost him $100,000 and countless hours of planning. The wilting was even more pronounced now. The ghost orchids looked like pale ghosts indeed, their ethereal beauty fading into translucent fragility. The Juliet roses had lost their proud bearing, petals beginning to brown at the edges. The catapult flowers, meant to bloom for one precious night, were closing prematurely, their brief moment of glory cut tragically short. Sheikh Rashid walked slowly toward the arrangement, reaching out as if to touch it, then pulling his hand back. "My wife's grandmother tended these roses," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "In her garden in the Bekaa Valley. She passed away 5 years ago. Mariam still speaks of walking through that garden as a child, of her grandmother teaching her the names of every flower, every herb. These roses—" He paused, composing himself. These were the last connection to that memory. The room was silent, except for the faint sound of the Gulf waters far below. Mrs. Al-Mazrui looked like she might cry. Mr. Al-Fahim stood rigid, his professional composure barely masking his distress. Even Chef Rousseau, who had joined them, looked uncharacteristically subdued. "We have contacted every florist in Dubai," Mr. Al-Fahim began, his voice formal and apologetic. "We can arrange for a replacement centerpiece within the hour. Not of the same caliber, of course, but something befitting the occasion. And naturally, we will refund the full cost of the original arrangement, plus additional compensation for this inexcusable failure." Sheikh Rashid turned to look at him, and Layla was struck by the depth of sorrow in his eyes. "You don't understand," he said gently. "This isn't about the money. This arrangement was going to tell Mariam a story, our story. Every flower had meaning. Every bloom represented a moment we've shared, a promise we've kept." He gestured to the wilting orchids. The ghost orchids were for the rare, precious nature of finding true partnership. The Juliet roses for the patience required to build something beautiful over time. The kadupul for the fleeting nature of each moment together, each one deserving to be cherished. He walked to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. I was going to explain it all to her tonight. Show her how every element connected to our journey. How can I do that with substitute flowers? How can I tell her that her grandmother's roses, the ones I spent 2 years secretly cultivating from cuttings I had imported, are dying because of— He trailed off, shaking his head. Perhaps— The word escaped Layla's lips before she could stop herself. It was barely above a whisper, yet in the heavy silence of the room, it carried. Every head turned toward her. Mrs. Al-Mazroui's eyes widened in warning. Junior staff did not speak out of turn in front of VIP guests, certainly not during a crisis. But something in Layla's expression made the operations manager hold her tongue. Sheikh Rashid looked at her directly for the first time. "Yes?" His voice held no impatience, only a desperate thread of hope. Layla's heart hammered against her ribs. What was she doing? She was a student waitress, not a botanical expert, but she thought of her grandmother's hands, weathered and gentle, coaxing life from the harshest desert. She thought of the small garden Amina had maintained against all odds, where flowers bloomed in defiance of sand and scorching sun. She thought of the nights spent learning ancient preservation techniques, wisdom passed down through countless generations of Bedouin women who understood survival in impossible conditions. "I might be able to help," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I cannot promise they will be perfect, but I believe I can revive them enough for tonight." Mr. Al-Fahim stepped forward, his expression doubtful. "Layla, Alessandro Benedetti himself left specific instructions. These are incredibly rare specimens. If we attempt anything without proper expertise—" "Let her speak," Sheikh Rashid interrupted quietly, his eyes never leaving Layla's face. "Please." Layla swallowed hard, aware that every staff member was staring at her with a mixture of concern and disbelief. "My grandmother raised me in the desert, in the old Bedouin way. She was a healer and a keeper of traditional plant knowledge. She taught me techniques that her grandmother taught her, methods for preserving and reviving plants in extreme conditions." She moved closer to the arrangement, her hands hovering over the wilting blooms without touching them. "These flowers are in shock from the dry air and the cold current. They're stressed, but they're not dead, not yet. The roots are still healthy. See how the water in the base is still clear. That means they're still drawing moisture, just not efficiently enough to combat the stress." Omar spoke up, his tone respectful but skeptical. "With all due respect, Layla, these are not desert plants. These are cultivated rarities that require specific conditions. What would desert techniques accomplish?" Layla turned to face him, and in that moment she channeled her grandmother's quiet confidence. "The principle is the same. A stressed plant needs 3 things: proper hydration, protection from environmental extremes, and gentle encouragement to redirect its energy toward survival rather than panic. My grandmother could revive roses that had been left in the sun for days, orchids that had been frost-damaged. The specific species don't matter. The fundamentals of plant stress response are universal. She looked at Sheikh Rashid, finding courage in his attentive gaze. First, I would move the arrangement away from all air currents, not just the vent, but also the windows. Even minimal drafts cause stress. Second, I would prepare a solution of water with a very specific ratio of natural honey and a pinch of desert salt. The honey provides immediate energy to the cells, while the salt helps regulate moisture absorption. Third, I would mist each bloom individually, using a technique my grandmother called the evening blessing. Gentle pressure that mimics the dew that settles on desert flowers at night. And then? Sheikh Rashid asked, his voice barely audible. Then I would speak to them, Layla said simply. My grandmother believed that plants respond to intention, to care. She would tell them they were strong, that they had purpose. I know it sounds not foolish, Sheikh Rashid interrupted, his expression softening. My wife's grandmother believed the same thing. She said her roses grew because she sang to them every morning. A charged silence fell over the room. Layla could see Mrs. Al-Mazrui calculating risks, Mr. Al-Fahim weighing professional liability against impossible hope. But Sheikh Rashid's face had transformed. The devastation had given way to something else, a fragile, tentative belief. How long would it take? He asked. 1 hour, Layla said, though her heart raced with uncertainty. Maybe 90 minutes to see real improvement. But I need complete quiet and access to the hotel kitchen for specific supplies. Sheikh Rashid didn't hesitate. Whatever you need. Everyone else, please leave us. He looked at Mrs. Al-Mazrui and Mr. Al-Fahim. Give her the space to work. Mrs. Al-Mazrui opened her mouth to protest, then closed it, nodding instead. I'll be right outside if you need anything, she said to Layla, her tone carrying both encouragement and warning. The staff filed out silently, leaving only Layla, Sheikh Rashid, and his security team, who positioned themselves discreetly near the entrance. You may stay if you wish, Layla said to the sheikh, surprising herself with her calm. But you must be absolutely silent. No movement, no phone calls. Plants are sensitive to vibrations and energy. Sheikh Rashid nodded and settled into a chair against the far wall, his hands folded in his lap, his posture one of quiet reverence. For a man who commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals, he looked remarkably humble. Layla went to work immediately. First, she carefully wheeled the arrangement to the corner of the room farthest from any windows or vents, positioning it where the air was stillest. She moved with deliberate slowness, mindful that any jostling could further stress the delicate blooms. Her hands were steady despite her nerves, muscle memory from years of helping her grandmother in the garden taking over. Next, she hurried to the kitchen, where Chef Rousseau met her with raised eyebrows but no questions. She requested a small bowl, room-temperature filtered water, raw organic honey, and fine sea salt. The chef watched with curiosity as she measured precisely 2 tablespoons of honey to 1 liter of water, just 3 grains of salt. She stirred the mixture slowly, clockwise, until it reached perfect clarity. My grandmother said the direction matters, Layla explained quietly, though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to Chef Rousseau or to herself. Clockwise draws energy in, counterclockwise disperses it. Back in the dining room, Sheikh Rashid hadn't moved. His eyes followed her as she returned with the bowl and a clean spray bottle she'd filled with plain water. She also carried several small cloths and, surprisingly, a leather pouch that she'd retrieved from her locker. Kneeling beside the arrangement, Layla opened the pouch, her grandmother's parting gift. Inside were dried desert herbs, carefully preserved, fragments of rue for strength, tiny pieces of myrtle for resilience, and threads of wild thyme for revival. She crushed small amounts between her fingers, releasing their faint, earthy fragrance, and added them to the honey water solution. These are from the empty quarter, she said softly, glancing at Sheikh Rashid. "My grandmother gathered them. They contain compounds that help plants regulate stress responses." She began with the ghost orchids, the most delicate of the arrangement. Dipping a soft cloth in the honey solution, she gently dabbed the base of each drooping petal, working from the stem outward. Her movements were ritualistic, precise. With her other hand, she supported each bloom, her touch feather-light. "Grandmother used to say that flowers are like children," Layla murmured, falling into the meditative rhythm. "When they're frightened, they need reassurance. When they're hurt, they need gentle care. You cannot force them to be strong. You must remind them of their own strength." She worked methodically, moving from the orchids to the Juliet roses, then to the heritage roses from Lebanon. With each flower, she repeated the process. Apply the solution, support the bloom, whisper encouragement in Arabic, the same words her grandmother had used. "You are strong. You have purpose. You are loved." The room was utterly silent, except for the soft whisper of her voice and the gentle sound of water. Time seemed to slow and stretch. Layla lost herself in the work, her world narrowing to just her hands, the flowers, and the ancient knowledge flowing through her. After 45 minutes, Layla noticed the first change. One of the ghost orchids, the most severely wilted, began to lift almost imperceptibly. The drooping petal edges, which had curled inward in distress, started to relax and spread. It was subtle, barely visible, but Layla's trained eye caught it immediately. Her heart leapt. She continued working, not daring to break the spell. She moved to the final stage of her grandmother's technique, the evening blessing. Using the spray bottle filled with plain water, she created a fine mist above the arrangement, letting it settle over the blooms like dew. The droplets caught the soft light, creating tiny rainbows. As she misted, she hummed quietly, an old Bedouin melody her grandmother had sung, a wordless tune that spoke of desert nights and resilience and hope. Sheikh Rashid shifted slightly in his chair, and Layla glanced at him. His eyes were fixed on the arrangement, and she realized he had noticed the change too. The transformation was becoming more visible now. The Juliet roses, which had hung their heads in defeat, were slowly regaining their regal bearing. The petals, which had been losing their deep crimson color, seemed to darken and deepen again as moisture returned to their cells. "It's working," Sheikh Rashid whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Layla nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She felt tears pricking at her eyes, relief, wonder, and a deep connection to her grandmother, whose wisdom was proving true even here in this glittering tower, thousands of miles from the desert where it had been born. She continued the evening blessing, misting each section of the arrangement 3 times, another detail her grandmother had insisted upon. 3 is the number of completion, Amina had told her. Once for the body, once for the spirit, once for the purpose. As the minutes passed, the revival became undeniable. The ghost orchids stood tall again, their ethereal white petals regaining their luminescent quality. The Juliet roses opened more fully, their layered petals unfurling, as they had been designed to do after 15 years of careful breeding. Even the precious cadupul flowers, which Layla had feared were beyond saving, showed new life, their delicate blooms opening wider, preparing for their one night of glory. But it was the heritage roses from Lebanon that touched Layla most deeply. As she worked with them, applying the honey solution with special care, she thought of Sheikha Mariam's grandmother, of the Bekaa Valley garden, of hands in soil and love passed through generations. These roses had survived being cut from their ancestral garden, transported across countries, incorporated into this elaborate arrangement, and then nearly killed by environmental stress. Yet here they were, responding to care, choosing to live. "My grandmother always said," Layla spoke softly, breaking the long silence, "that plants want to survive. They want to bloom and fulfill their purpose. Sometimes they just need someone to remind them how. She performed one final inspection, gently touching each bloom, checking the firmness of the petals, the strength of the stems, the vitality of the leaves. Everything looked healthy again. Not perfect, perhaps, but vibrant and alive. The arrangement had regained its breathtaking beauty, the cascade of colors and textures once again defying nature with its artistry. Layla stepped back, exhausted but exhilarated. She had been working for just over an hour, but it felt like both moments and lifetimes. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down the spray bottle. Sheikh Rashid stood slowly, approaching the arrangement with reverence. He circled it carefully, examining every angle, every bloom. When he finally turned to face Layla, his eyes were wet with tears. "How did you?" he began, then stopped, shaking his head in wonder. "I have never seen anything like this. You brought them back from death." "Not from death," Layla corrected gently. "They were never dying. They were just forgotten for a moment. Plants are like us. They need to be seen, to be cared for, to be reminded that someone believes in their strength." Sheikh Rashid stood in silence for a long moment, his hand resting gently on his chest, as though trying to calm his racing heart. Then he did something that shocked Layla completely. He bowed to her, a deep, respectful bow that spoke of genuine gratitude and honor. "Please," Layla said quickly, her cheeks flushing, "you don't need to—" "I do," he interrupted gently, straightening. "What you have done tonight, it's more than saving flowers. You've saved something I cannot replace. My wife's memory of her grandmother, our anniversary celebration, the story I wanted to tell her." He paused, his voice catching. "You gave me back the ability to honor 20 years of love." He walked to the door and opened it. Mrs. Al-Mazrui, Mr. Al-Fahim, Omar, and several other staff members who had been waiting anxiously in the corridor immediately looked up, their faces tense with anticipation. "Come," Sheikh Rashid said simply. "Come and see." Aduri. They filed in slowly, and Layla watched their expressions transform from worry to disbelief to wonder. Mrs. Al-Mazroui's hand flew to her mouth. Chef Rousseau, who had followed the group, let out a low whistle of amazement. Omar simply stared, shaking his head in incredulity. "It's impossible," Mr. Al-Fahim breathed. "These flowers were dying an hour ago." "Not impossible," Sheikh Rashid corrected, his eyes finding Layla. "Just ancient wisdom, properly applied. This young woman has a gift that no amount of modern training can replicate." Mrs. Al-Mazrui approached Layla, taking both her hands. "You saved us all," she said quietly. "I don't know how to thank you." Layla felt overwhelmed by the attention, unused to being at the center of such praise. "I just did what my grandmother taught me," she said softly. "She deserves the credit." Sheikh Rashid studied her thoughtfully. "Tell me about yourself, Layla, beyond what you've shown us tonight." And so, with the entire staff listening, Layla found herself sharing her story. Growing up in the desert with her grandmother, coming to Dubai to pursue her education, working 2 jobs to pay tuition and send money home, studying hospitality management while serving tables at the Burj Astria. She spoke of her tiny apartment, her student loans, her dreams of one day managing a hotel of her own where she could blend the warmth of traditional Arab hospitality with modern luxury service. Sheikh Rashid listened intently, asking occasional questions about her coursework, her financial situation, her grandmother's health. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "How much longer do you have in your program?" he asked. "1.5 years, Layla replied. "If I can maintain my current pace. Sometimes I have to reduce my course load when money is tight." Sheikh Rashid nodded slowly. Then he smiled, a warm, genuine smile that transformed his serious face. "I would like to make you an offer, Layla. Tonight, you've demonstrated something that universities cannot teach: wisdom, intuition, grace under pressure, and genuine care for others. These qualities are rare, especially combined with your technical knowledge and work ethic." He paused, and Layla felt her heart begin to race again, though for a different reason now. "I would like to sponsor your education," Sheikh Rashid continued. "Your full tuition, living expenses, books, everything you need to complete your degree without working these exhausting double shifts. In return, I ask only that you maintain your studies and that you promise to never lose the wisdom your grandmother gave you. The hospitality industry needs people like you, people who understand that true service comes from the heart, not just from training manuals." Layla felt the room spin. She couldn't process what she was hearing. "Sheikh Rashid, I cannot possibly accept—" "You can, and you will," he said firmly but kindly. "Consider it an investment. One day, when you manage that hotel you dream of, perhaps you'll remember this moment. Perhaps you'll hire a young person from a difficult background and give them a chance. Perhaps you'll teach others that ancient wisdom and modern innovation can coexist. That would be payment enough." Tears spilled down Layla's cheeks. That evening, as the sun set over the Persian Gulf in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Layla served Sheikh Rashid and Sheikha Mariam in the private dining room. She moved through her duties with quiet grace, presenting each course of the anniversary menu while trying to process the magnitude of what had happened. Sheikha Mariam was a striking woman, with kind eyes and an elegant demeanor. When she first entered the room and saw the floral arrangement, she had stopped in her tracks, her hand flying to her heart. "Rashid," she had whispered, tears immediately filling her eyes, "the roses from my grandmother's garden. How did you—" Sheikh Rashid had taken her hand, leading her closer to the arrangement, explaining the symbolism of each flower, the months of planning, the meaning behind every bloom. He told her about the crisis, about the young waitress who had saved everything using ancient Bedouin wisdom. Sheikha Mariam had insisted on meeting Layla personally, embracing her warmly and thanking her with such genuine emotion that Layla had nearly cried again. "My grandmother would have loved you," Sheikha Mariam had said, holding Layla's hands. "She believed that the old ways held magic that modern people had forgotten. You've proven her right." Now, as Layla cleared the final course and prepared to present the dessert, she watched the couple from the corner of her eye. They were holding hands across the table, speaking softly to each other, occasionally glancing at the flowers with wonder. The arrangement stood perfect and proud, each bloom radiating life and beauty, the Kadipul flowers open in their one-night glory, exactly as they should be. After the celebration concluded and the sheikh and his wife departed, with Sheikh Rashid pressing a business card into Layla's hand and reminding her to contact his office the next day, Layla finally had a moment alone. She stepped out onto the service balcony, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. Her grandmother answered on the second ring. "Layla, Habibti." "It's late. Is everything all right?" "Everything is wonderful, grandmother," Layla said, her voice breaking with emotion. "I have so much to tell you. Your wisdom. It saved me tonight. It saved something precious." As she recounted the entire story, she could hear her grandmother's soft laughter and occasional exclamations of pride. When Layla told her about Sheikh Rashid's offer to fund her education, there was a long silence. "See?" Amina finally said, her voice thick with tears. "I told you, my darling, the old ways are not forgotten. They are just waiting for the right moment, the right heart, the right hands. You carried our ancestors' knowledge into that tower of glass and gold, and you showed them that some things, care, wisdom, love, cannot be bought. They can only be given." "I wish you could have been there," Layla whispered. "I was there," her grandmother replied gently. In your hands, in your voice, in every movement you made. That is what it means to carry tradition forward. Not to preserve it in museums, but to let it live and breathe and save the day when it's needed most. 3 months later, Layla stood in the administrative office of her university, submitting her paperwork for full-time enrollment. Sheikh Rashid had been true to his word. Every expense covered, every barrier removed. She had quit her exhausting double shifts and now focused entirely on her studies, though she still worked part-time at the Burj Astria, not for the money, but because she had grown to love the work. Mrs. Al-Mazrui had been promoted, and she had personally requested that Layla be trained for future management positions. "You have something special," she had told Layla. "Not just knowledge, but heart. That's what makes truly great hospitality professionals." As Layla walked across campus that bright morning, she thought about the journey that had brought her here, from a small desert village to Dubai's most exclusive hotel, from near disaster to life-changing opportunity. She thought about her grandmother's wisdom, about Sheikh Rashid's generosity, about heritage roses that refused to die. Sometimes, she realized, the most valuable gifts are the ones passed down through generations, waiting patiently for the moment when ancient knowledge meets modern need, when humble wisdom saves the day, and when one sentence, "Perhaps I can help," changes everything. Thank you for reading Layla's story. If you enjoyed this tale of ancient wisdom meeting modern luxury, please like, share and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Let us know in the comments what traditional knowledge has been passed down in your family. Remember, sometimes the most powerful solutions come not from expensive technology or formal training, but from the timeless wisdom of those who came before us. Your heritage matters, your voice matters, and sometimes all it takes is the courage to step forward and say, "Perhaps I can help."